Great, thank you. Good morning. I'm Lisa Neal from Twins and Needles, and this is a beautiful historic cemetery called St. Mary's in Rockville, Maryland. It is raining, but it's sunshiny, so I guess we're gonna still try to do this. So this is my 1826 cotton day gown. I just finished it last night. It took 65 hours to construct, both with hand sewing and a little bit of machine work, mainly for straight seams and some of the hems and the rolled hem pieces. It is specifically constructed and designed and styled as the kind of day dress you might wear in the morning to do your housework or receive very intimate guests. And I made it out of 8 yards of cotton fabric that cost about $200 total. The notions and the linings and the other little bits and bobs cost about $50. But again, the real expense of this gown, as in the 19th century, is my labor. So 65 hours or so, even with what time would have been like help from an apprentice or my children to do some of the very, very straight stitching, is still quite a time investment. For me personally, as a modern person, it meant essentially 4 weeks of my sewing time, because I spend about 15 hours a week sewing, as my husband will attest. I already had all of the pieces I needed to wear it with, which is the other shortcut, if you will. With this, I am wearing a handkerchief shirt or shirt handkerchief, a pair of stays, 3 petticoats, stockings, 19th century style shoes, and a shift. So, and a cap, beautiful cap that is you can't see the umbrella. Okay. Beautiful cap, linen cap, a little old-fashioned for this period, but I'm in my mid-40s, so people tended to kind of stick with stuff they were comfortable with, and you would definitely not go outside with your head uncovered. I also have a bonnet that I haven't trimmed yet, which I may or may not get to in the next week. That will be its own reveal, because it'll be the first time I've actually trimmed a bonnet. But why 1826 specifically? 200 years ago exactly? Well, this is because it is the anniversary of the Elias Boudinot address to the whites in May. In Philadelphia, in May of 1826, Elias Boudinot, the Cherokee author and editor, not the American poet and philosopher, important distinction, gave an address to the whites in Philadelphia, which was largely a fundraising campaign to try to get enough money from largely missionaries and churches to start our own press. Why would missionaries and churches want us to have our own press? They wanted us to translate the Bible. And they considered that to be a very important problem, which was trying to proselytize to Cherokees when they didn't speak Cherokee. And Cherokee is apparently extremely hard to learn as an adult when you weren't raised around it and grew up speaking maybe English, German, and reading Latin. They just couldn't do it. It was too hard for them. So originally they started with trying to teach Cherokees English, and there were many Cherokees who did learn English, but they realized that the real barrier to converting the non-English speaking part of the tribe was to be able to write and speak to them in their own language. And so the missionaries were motivated to help us do that, and they needed someone like Elias Boudinot to make that possible. So once again, she has won. I was cutting out. I actually got almost to the last part, which is the bias strips. She followed me around meowing until I sat down for snoogles. Such a good girl. Just do a little little commotion for the dress. I will link below. I started with my own shapes, but the construction details, especially these wolf teeth points and the exact way that I did the skirt and the way the sleeves are cut is from a commercially available pattern. So if you want a dress like this, you can have it. I can outline the differences. Basically, I took this commercial pattern that is based on an 1826 silk gown. I gave it a little more lining because the original gown depended on the strength and stiffness of the silk to give it the nice lines on the structure of the bodice. And my fabric is not a structured silk. It is a beautiful, soft, flowy cotton. The original gown that this is based on also had the sleeves cut on the straight. These sleeves are cut on the bias, basically because when I tried the muslin in the cotton, I didn't like the way it sat. And this looked more like the way I had seen a lot of fashion plates and drawings depicting at the time. We're not doing full mutton giant balloon sleeve anymore. The top of the sleeve has started to collapse, but hasn't fully collapsed down to the elbow, like my 1830s gowns. And it's a very light construction on the sleeve. It is literally a one-piece sleeve that you sew up with one edge, and in this case, cut on the bias. The nice thing is cutting these sleeves on the bias is also a really great technique that you see a lot in early 19th century gowns that also use a lot of piping, because it's very easy to get all the piping you need out of the offcuts from your bias cut sleeves. And as long as you have the attitude that, oh, I'm going to piece all of this, you can actually save a lot of fabric and it doesn't waste. And actually you can cut a bias sleeve, even a pretty long one, on a pretty reasonable amount of fabric when the fabric is wide and is basically at the widths that became available following the advent of more machine-powered looms and non-human woven fabric. And actually, this fabric, part of what is really fun about it is that to the modern eye, it looks really busy. It looks pretty out there. I actually wasn't sure I even liked it at first. I got it because it is specifically a reproduction of a specific fabric from the 1820s, so it was like too perfect. But it actually, at the time, would have been extremely expensive, on par with silk, and shows design choices meant to evoke brocaded silk and brocades. So we have these subtle stripes. I'll do a close-up later. We have these subtle stripes here in the background white and orange pieces that are a very specific flow back to the visual of a brocaded silk ground. And then we have our little contrasting florals that would have greatly added to the expense of this fabric. And so just because you have these big bright contrasts, that took 2 or 3 extra processes to get those set in there and have the repeats be pretty close. And so this fabric is a really fascinating glimpse into what was viewed as not just beautiful and desirable, but where people were sort of stretching the boundaries of what was technologically possible for their era and just getting very extravagant and intense with it. And apparently in the British and French press, Americans were specifically considered to be way too into this. Like, we pushed this as far as it would go. And this fabric is a really great example of that. You've got so much going on. You have the different stripes from the different backgrounds on the orange and white ground. You have the suggestion of a blocked print that would have originally been a hand done print, but is done in this case with brass rollers. And they didn't even take out the background pattern to match, to give voids here. So when you look really carefully at the flowers, you can see through them the background filigree print. And that was how the original is, and that is how this reproduction is. And I am just so thankful that this is available. So, but hey, did you know that my sister and I wrote a book about making 19th century clothes to portray our ancestor, Polly Beck? If you haven't read it, you probably should. You can get it anywhere books are sold, maybe, probably, at least on the internet. And I'll link in the description. Buy our book. We talk about how we figured out what we think our ancestor would have worn. We talk about how we made all this stuff. And we talk a lot about Cherokee cultural history from the 19th century, because she lived from 1820 to 1872. And her life and the time frame that she lived through was a time of massive, intense cultural change and debate among Cherokees. Debate is still not entirely settled, to be honest. And I made this dress because in my research about her, I kept coming up against this figure who I had always thought of as, you know, this scoundrel, and didn't think anything about, aside from knowing that I thought it was good that he had been chopped to death with axes and left to die in a ditch. And I won't say he didn't deserve that. I'm still not sure. But his wife's shopping list from the 1820s was part of what helped us decide that our ancestors, by not this period, but by the 1830s, were definitely wearing the same stuff that American women were wearing, who had the same amount of money and resources. And this would have probably been a little more of it would have been a desirable gown to my ancestors living through the 1820s, but I can't promise you any of them had it. But I am in love with it, and it's very fun. So, okay, how's that? Great. Thanks for coming to my video. Appreciate your time, and we look forward to seeing you soon.
Oh. Make it.
Something like that. Not Edward Haley. Oh, these are new. Aw. Oh, George K. Henn Jr., hugger extraordinaire. Oh, that's nice. Oh, Mary Estelle got Gastel. She taught us how to love. Oh, that's just lovely. Oh. Oh wait, here's a good one. Aw, they're a little 10-year-old. Okay, yeah, it's raining. It's raining. Ooh. Ooh. In loving remembrance, W. Armstead West. Oh, he was only 15 years old, buddy. Okay, I'm going in. Okay. Okay, I heard you. I'm going.